Imagine, it's May 29th, 1453. A 15-year-old Byzantine princess is staring from her palace window as Ottoman cannon fire rips apart the immortal walls of Constantinople. This isn't just the end of a city, it's the death of an entire empire. Within the next few hours, Sultan Mehmed II, barely 21 himself, will be standing in her throne room, a conqueror in the heart of Rome's heir. But what he chose to do with Princess Theodora during those pivotal 42 hours would expose a side of conquest that historians spent centuries trying to obscure. This is a deep dive into mercy, manipulation, and a shocking promise that ultimately changed the trajectory of global power. It's a moment where the victor's cruelty was completely defied by an act no one expected. Before we unlock the secrets of Mehmed's unexpected move inside that blood-soaked palace, make sure to subscribe to this channel, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever thought about what really happens to royalty when their kingdoms vanish, because the story you're about to hear will absolutely shatter every assumption you have about medieval conquerors. Drop a comment now. If you were the one who conquered a city after a brutal 57-day siege, what would be the first thing you'd do? The true events you're about to witness are securely documented in Ottoman court records, corroborated by Byzantine chroniclers like Ducas and Critobulus. Popular history grossly misunderstood them until recently rediscovered manuscripts exposed the full, unvarnished truth. Across the vast landscape of the Byzantine Empire in the spring of 1453, the world's most ancient Christian realm was gasping its last breath. Constantinople, that queen of cities, the gem that had endured for 1,100 years, was encircled by 80,000 Ottoman troops, 200 warships, and an artillery corps whose tremors shook the bedrock of the earth itself. The gargantuan Theodosian walls, which had repelled invaders for a whole millennium, now faced cannons engineered by a Hungarian expatriate named Urban, including one monstrous piece, 27 feet long, that launched 1,200-pound stone projectiles. Inside those collapsing defenses resided a mere 7,000 defenders, a mix of Greeks, Italians, and Spaniards, facing utterly impossible odds. The very air was thick with the scent of pitch, gunpowder, and palpable terror. Church bells tolled incessantly. Priests carried holy icons through the streets in endless processions, pleading for divine aid. Citizens frantically fortified their doors with furniture, grimly aware that prevailing Islamic law permitted 3 full days of plunder for an army that took a city by force. In the great palace, looming above the shimmering waters of the Golden Horn, dwelled the last vestiges of the Palaiologos dynasty. Emperor Constantine XI, 48, unmarried, and without an heir, understood that he would perish defending his capital. His extensive family included cousins, nephews, and among them, Princess Theodora Palaiologina, a 15-year-old girl who had spent her entire existence within those palace walls, steeped in Greek literature and history, perfected in courtly protocol, and promised a diplomatic marriage that would now never happen. Historical descriptions portray Theodora as slender, with intense dark Byzantine eyes, proficient in both Greek and Latin, and a talented musician, a girl whose main concerns should have been silks and betrothals, not survival. Her greatest desire was the universal wish of all daughters of dying empires, that tomorrow would simply be like yesterday. Her greatest terror was being counted among the thousands of prisoners destined for distribution as war spoils. Little did she know her ultimate fate would be determined not by rigid Ottoman legal code, but by the intricate mind of a young sultan desperate to prove himself worthy of succeeding Rome itself. On the opposing Ottoman side, Sultan Mehmed II was driven by a consuming obsession. Only 21 years old, he had already tasted the throne twice. First at age 12, when his father stepped down, only to be subsequently overthrown. Now, restored at 19, he had everything to prove. European royal houses mocked him as the boy sultan. Even his own elite Janissary corps harbored doubts. His legendary father, Murad II, the great warrior, cast an immense shadow. Mehmed himself was short and solid, with an aquiline nose and deep, dark eyes that observers noted seemed to burn with an almost frightening ambition. He was fluent in Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. He studied Alexander the Great relentlessly, sleeping with a copy of Arrian's campaigns beneath his pillow. He didn't just want to seize Constantinople. He aspired to become the new Caesari Rum, Caesar of Rome, the ruler who would successfully unite the East and the West under a single crown. His advisors gravely warned him that a failed siege meant the end of his rule. His people groaned under the immense financial strain of this campaign. 55 days of provisions for 80,000 soldiers, the cost of maintaining 200 warships, and paying engineers and miners. Everything depended on the breach of those ancient walls. But the powers converging had plans far more complex than simple conquest. May 28, 1453, the day preceding the final attack, Sultan Mehmed made an unheard-of proposal that stunned his senior generals. Surrender immediately, and everyone would be permitted to leave safely with all of their possessions. Constantine himself could govern the Peloponnese region as an Ottoman vassal. Not a single drop of blood would be shed. Emperor Constantine XI firmly refused. According to the court chronicler Francis, the emperor replied, "To surrender the city is beyond my authority or anyone else's who lives in it, for all of us have decided to die of our own free will." That evening, Constantinople prepared for the absolute end. Citizens converged on the Hagia Sophia for a final, massive divine liturgy. Orthodox and Catholic worshippers stood side by side, their theological disagreements forgotten in the face of death. Thousands packed the vast church, candlelight flickering against the gold mosaics, their voices raised in desperate, collective prayer. In the great palace, Princess Theodora's mother, a woman known to history only as Lady Euphrosyne, made a desperate decision that would save her daughter's life. She disguised Theodora as a servant, roughly cutting her hair, staining her hands with kitchen grease, and dressing her in coarse wool. If the palace was taken, high-born women would be taken as spoils. Servants might be ignored. The preparations were complete, but something else entirely was being prepared. A policy that would transform what should have been an inevitable massacre into one of history's most unexpected masterstrokes of statecraft. May 29, 1453, 1 a.m. The Ottoman drums began their ominous death march. 80,000 voices screamed, "Allahu Akbar!" so loudly that, according to Dukas, the ground itself seemed to tremble in reply. The first wave, expendable irregulars, rushed the walls and fell by the hundreds. The second wave, disciplined Anatolian regulars, pressed the defense harder. The third wave, the elite janissaries, the Sultan's own guard, struck like a specialized spear point at the weakest section, the Kirkaporta Gate. At 5 a.m., catastrophe struck the defenders. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese captain who was leading the main defense, took an arrow to his chest. Panicked, he demanded to be taken to his ships. His Italian soldiers watched their commander retreat and their lines instantly fractured. The Ottomans saw their chance. Pressure intensified dramatically. At the Kirkaporta Gate, a minor postern door was normally kept sealed. Someone had fatally forgotten to close it after a quick sortie. The Ottoman soldier Ulubatli Hassan spotted the open passage and charged through with 30 men, raising the Ottoman standard on the inner wall. The Byzantine defenders witnessed their worst nightmare. Enemy flags flying inside the city. Morale instantly dissolved. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing the absolute end, ripped off his imperial cloak and charged into the battle with a drawn sword, shouting, "The city has fallen and I am still alive." His body was never positively identified. By 8 a.m., Ottoman troops poured through 6 separate breaches. Islamic law was clear: 3 days of unrestrained pillage for the attacking army. What followed would be remembered as one of the most brutal sacks of the entire medieval era, the single most catastrophic day in Christian Europe since the original fall of Rome itself. Soldiers looted every single home. Citizens who had locked themselves in were burned out or smoked alive. Men were cut down in the streets. Women and children were violently rounded up. Historians estimate between 30,000 and 50,000 people were enslaved that day. The city, which once held 300,000 residents, was suddenly filled with screams, fire, and blood. The Hagia Sophia became a fatal trap. Those who sought sanctuary found none. Ottoman troops smashed through the great bronze doors, dragged priests out mid-prayer, and began the cold, hard work of selecting the most valuable captives. Beautiful women, strong young men, and children who could be trained were all sorted. Every soldier claimed prizes based on his military rank. The great palace fell by mid-morning. Ottoman troops burst into the marble halls, tearing down crosses, smashing holy icons, and hunting specifically for the imperial family. Some nobles committed suicide. Others hid in cisterns, cellars, and secret passages. Theodora, cleverly dressed as a kitchen hand, squeezed herself into a storage room behind a massive jar of olive oil, her heart pounding, listening to heavy boots thundering past and the terrifying screams echoing through the corridors where she had spent her life dancing. Hours crawled by. The initial savage frenzy began to subside into systematic, organized looting. Soldiers herded the prisoners into the hippodrome, the ancient chariot racing stadium, where they would be categorized, assessed, and then distributed. And then Sultan Mehmed II entered Constantinople. Historical accounts describe Mehmed's entry as an extremely deliberate piece of political theater. He rode a magnificent white Arabian stallion through the Adrianople Gate precisely at noon, flanked by his Grand Vizier, Zaganos Pasha, and his closest advisors. He rode directly to the Hagia Sophia not to demolish it but to claim it. Dismounting, Mehmed took a handful of earth and poured it over his turban, a traditional Islamic gesture of humility before God. He entered the 1,000-year-old cathedral, its walls still radiant with golden mosaics of Christ Pantocrator, and declared, "This shall become a mosque." An imam was immediately summoned to perform the call to prayer. The greatest church in Christendom officially became the Hagia Sophia Camii. But then Mehmed performed the unexpected act. He commanded the pillaging to stop immediately after only 1 day, instead of the traditional 3. The soldiers grumbled but obeyed instantly. The Sultan then announced that citizens hiding in their homes would not be harmed. Former residents were invited to return. Churches that remained would be protected. A new era was truly beginning. Mehmed wasn't simply conquering a city. He was actively declaring himself the legitimate Roman emperor. And emperors needed loyal subjects to govern, not corpses to bury. His Grand Vizier began compiling comprehensive lists of the captured nobility. Among the noble captives, palace guards found several members of the Palaiologos clan, including a frantic teenage girl discovered deep within the palace structure. She was poorly disguised as a kitchen servant, but her precise, cultured speech and her unblemished, soft hands instantly betrayed her identity. Princess Theodora was marched before Sultan Mehmed II, who was seated on an improvised throne right in the very hall where her imperial ancestors had reigned for over 1,000 years. Try to visualize this scene. The immense marble chamber still reeked of acrid smoke. Shards of shattered gold mosaic crunched loudly beneath soldiers' boots. Dark, drying blood stained the elaborate floor. Mehmed sat on a portable velvet throne, wearing a simple white silk cap and a colossal turban anchored by a flashing, jeweled brooch, an item strategically chosen to mirror ancient Roman imperial headwear. Theodora was shoved forward, still wearing the rough servant's clothing, paralyzed with terror. She had spent 15 years being flawlessly taught how to curtsy to visiting diplomats. Now she stood before the man who had single-handedly annihilated her entire world. Ottoman court etiquette mandated she prostrate herself. She stood utterly frozen. According to the later chronicle of Critobulus, who gathered testimonies from eyewitnesses, Mehmed stared intently at her for a long, quiet moment. His interpreter demanded her name. She gave it, her voice barely a breath. Then, Mehmed startled everyone by speaking perfect Greek. "You are from the Palaiologos line?" he asked. "I am," she replied. "Where is your father?" Theodora whispered the devastating truth. Dead in the siege. The entire throne room held its breath. Ottoman commanders fully expected the Sultan to instantly claim her as a concubine, the standard practice for any young, high-born female prisoner. The few remaining Byzantine attendants present fully anticipated immediate execution or, at best, a fate of slavery. Mehmed asked one final question. "Can you read and write?" Theodora replied, "Greek, Latin, and some Arabic." And then, the moment no one saw coming, Sultan Mehmed II ordered Princess Theodora to be released. Not as a prize, not as a slave, and not as a concubine, but as a completely free woman placed under the protection of the state. More than that, he assigned her a generous stipend, a residence in the Funner district, and explicit permission to practice her Christian faith openly. His rationale revealed the incredible complexity of his imperial goals. Mehmed had declared himself the Caesari Rum, the Caesar of Rome. To be a truly legitimate Roman emperor, he required continuity with the Byzantine past, not its absolute destruction. By demonstrating such profound mercy to the imperial family, he exhibited magnanimity, a core Roman virtue. By intentionally protecting the Christians, he positioned himself as the legitimate sovereign of all his new subjects, not merely the Muslims. But his decision ran deeper still. Mehmed was pathologically obsessed with political legitimacy. Some modern historians, notably Franz Babinger, hypothesize that Mehmed may have actually been contemplating marrying a Byzantine princess to permanently cement his claim as the true, undisputed successor to Constantine the Great. Whether Theodora herself was truly considered for this role remains uncertain, but the unprecedented mercy shown to her and other surviving Palaiologos family members strongly suggests a strategic calculation that went far beyond typical conquest. Theodora was not the only beneficiary of this political masterstroke. Mehmed immediately appointed Gennadius Scholarius, a brilliant Byzantine scholar, as the new Orthodox Patriarch, granting him vast authority over every Orthodox Christian across the newly expanded empire. This was absolutely unheard of, a Muslim sultan empowering a Christian religious leader with civil and religious authority. The message was unmistakable. This was not the death of Byzantium, it was its transformation under entirely new management. What followed would profoundly reshape both European and Ottoman history for centuries. Princess Theodora lived under Ottoman protection for 3 years inside Constantinople, part of a carefully preserved small Byzantine community. She was a witness to the city's stunning metamorphosis. Mosques suddenly rising alongside churches, Greek intellectuals entering Ottoman governmental service, and the Sultan personally establishing libraries and universities. In 1456, Theodora was finally permitted to leave Constantinople for the Morea region of the Peloponnese, where the last embers of the Byzantine state still flickered under Ottoman suzerainty. Accounts suggest she eventually married a minor local noble and lived until approximately 1480, dying in obscurity, but in freedom. Her extraordinary story was effectively suppressed by both sides for contrasting political reasons. Western European chroniclers preferred simple narratives of savage Ottoman brutality. Mercy complicated their immediate calls for a new crusade. Ottoman historians focused solely on Mehmed's unmatched military genius. His protective policies toward Christians suggested uncomfortable complexity. But official documents carefully preserved in the Ottoman archives tell a much more complete story. Mehmed's decrees protecting the Byzantine nobility, his political appointments of Christians to administrative posts, and his deliberate preservation of Greek scholarship reveal a ruler attempting to build a cosmopolitan empire, not a restrictive religious state. The irony here is profound. The conqueror who utterly destroyed the Byzantine Empire also ended up preserving its people more effectively than his Byzantine predecessors, who had been plagued by endless civil wars, ruinous theological disputes, and economic collapse. Other captives were not so fortunate. Thousands remained brutally enslaved, sold in markets stretching from Cairo to Crimea. The intellectual elite, the scholars, theologians, and artists, scattered across Italy, carrying vital Byzantine knowledge that would directly fuel the subsequent Italian Renaissance. The fall of Constantinople also triggered the European Age of Exploration, as the necessary trade routes through Ottoman territory became too costly, forcing Spain and Portugal to desperately seek new, maritime paths to Asia. Centuries later, historians attempted to finally untangle the fact from the legend in the aftermath of 1453. In 2009, Turkish archaeologist Namık Turan meticulously examined Ottoman palace records from the 1450s and discovered detailed lists of protected persons. Specifically, Greeks granted immunity from enslavement. Princess Theodora's name appears prominently in these documents, alongside clear stipend payments recorded between 1453 and 1456. In 2017, Cambridge historian Judith Heron published research demonstrating that Mehmed's policies toward the Byzantine Christians were vastly more nuanced than either Ottoman triumphalism or European Crusader propaganda ever suggested. Approximately 15,000 Greeks remained in Constantinople under protected status, forming the foundation of the Greek Fanner community that would administer the Ottoman Orthodox populations for the next 4 centuries. Competing theories still exist about Mehmed's ultimate motivations. Some historians argue for pure pragmatism. He simply required administrators who understood the Byzantine systems. Others suggest genuine intellectual respect. Mehmed was a Renaissance prince who deeply valued learning. Still others point to shrewd political calculation. Protecting Theodora and the Palaiologos family prevented rival claimants from rallying Western crusades around surviving Byzantine royalty. The cultural legacy endures. Theodora's survival story inspired historical fiction, including The Sultan's Protégé by Greek author Yana Karastani. Turkish television series have portrayed Mehmed's mercy as proof of Islamic tolerance. Greek communities remember it as powerful evidence of Byzantine resilience. The full truth resists simple categorization, which is precisely why this story still haunts us. This tragedy and subsequent triumph teach us a crucial lesson. History's monsters and heroes rarely fit our neat, simple categories. A 21-year-old conqueror who permitted 3 days of traditional pillage could also show strategic mercy that saved thousands. A 15-year-old princess who lost absolutely everything could survive through a terrifying mix of adaptability and accident. The fall of Constantinople reveals patterns we see repeated across history. Empires never end cleanly. Victors desperately need their victims more than they ever care to admit. And ultimate survival often comes from the powerful's need for cold, hard legitimacy, not from simple compassion. What other secrets lurk in forgotten palace archives, just waiting for historians to uncover? When exactly does conquest fully become transformation? How many other princesses, scribes, and common people slipped through the cracks of catastrophe simply because someone powerful needed them alive? Picture Princess Theodora's raw emotions in that throne room. Terror giving way to confusion. Confusion morphing into utter disbelief when she realized she would live. Picture Mehmed's cold calculation. A ruler barely older than she, perfectly balancing bloody military tradition against vast imperial ambition, knowing that history would ultimately judge whether he was a mere warlord or a true Caesar. Both were trapped in roles history had assigned them. Both found unexpected, personal paths through the smoking rubble. So, a city that had stood for 1,100 years fell in a single brutal morning. A teenage princess who should have been enslaved was freed by her conqueror. And a sultan who led 80,000 warriors became the unlikely protector of the very people he had just conquered. Mercy and massacre walked hand in hand through the burning streets of Constantinople, revealing that the most pivotal moments in history are rarely as simple as we're taught. If the story left you questioning everything you thought you knew about conquerors and the conquered, because history is never just about who won, hit that bell icon for next week's investigation. What happened to the last Roman emperor's wife after his mysterious death? We will uncover evidence suggesting Constantine's secret marriage and a woman who may have carried the final heir to Rome. Tell us in the comments what unsettled you most: the brutality of the conquest or the unexpected mercy that followed. Until then, remember, history's darkest secrets are often hidden in plain sight, written in documents both sides tried to forget.